I'm not sure I can address the degree to which that would be a WTO concern. I suppose if the tariff levels were to be adjusted for the United States to the levels at which Japan has already agreed with the TPP countries and the EU, I suppose that represents simply a leveling up. The challenging part, I think, comes if we get into the kind of scenario Wendy was just describing, where perhaps U.S. Agricultural interests that maybe didn't get everything they wanted out of the TPP negotiation decide to go back for another bite at the apple. That clearly will end up in a more lengthy negotiation at minimum. And given the way the joint statement from September is worded, the Japanese have already kind of laid that CP, TPP, EU level out there pretty clearly as their red line. My sense, however, is that quite a few of the agricultural industries interested in exporting to Japan were at least grudgingly satisfied with what came out of the TPP bilateral negotiations. And given that American farmers pretty much across the board are under incredible pressure, not only because of what's going on with Japan, but also with China, that getting relief as quickly as possible will be a very, very high objective for them.
Just on that point about agriculture, I mean, it's important to understand when Japan came to agreement on TPP on agriculture, this is a very fraught domestic issue. There was a lot of time and political capital expended to get Japanese agriculture on board to accept what was in TPP. So if there is a push for TPP plus, it really is something of a red line, I think, for Abe. Partly because the deal was constructed and it was a difficult political deal, so going beyond that would be extraordinarily difficult. And they do, I think, even if it's just at TPP levels, there has to be some reciprocal movement by the U.S. and of course, and just repeating, but the main thing is the 232, some kind of assurance that those tariffs will not be imposed, because it's a dangerous road to go down.
We've got time for one more question. Or we can turn it over to the next panel. I want to thank Wendy, Chris, and Dan for an excellent opening discussion. We tried to leave some of the auto and agricultural issues for the next panel. It's hard to avoid them completely, but thanks
to our
the
panel.
audience.
Thank you, Ira. You know, Ira, I'd be remiss if I didn't, seeing you up here on the stage and talking about U.S.-Japan trade, I'm reminded of an old friend of ours who's no longer with us, Ira Wolf, who we lost 3 years ago. I know is a friend of many of us, worked with many of us on the U.S.-Japan issues, and I don't think we'd be having an event today in 2019. If Ira were still with us, he would be on this panel or the next one. I just want to remember Ira, for those of you who knew him, he was a great leader on Japan, and there's a scholarship set up in his name for students to travel and work in Japan. And I want to remember Ira as seeing with, as we used to call Big Ira and Little Ira, but having Big Ira up here with thanks.
We always said that every Senate staff had to have 2 Iras.
Thanks. We'll be turning to we're not going to have a big break, we're just going to turn to our next panel momentarily. Thank you.